Hello, and thank you for tuning in today. Before we begin our session, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. My name is Elisa Zanola, and I'm head of events for the Fashion Scholarship Fund. As many of us are extremely familiar with Zoom at this point, there are some great features that we'd love for you to utilize. One of them is the chat box. Feel free to send comments to the panelists as the discussion is happening. And there's also the Q&A box. As questions come to mind, submit them and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A segment of our session. And now I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Peter Arnold.
Thank you, Elisa, for that kind introduction. Welcome everyone to the third of our workforce preparedness sessions in our 9-week Summer Scholar Series. Tonight's session is themed A Crash Course in Business Accounting, a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm especially pleased that we are presenting and that we have as the presenter our friend from Milk Makeup CFO, Steve Nguyen. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
Guys, I don't want to hold Steve back. He's got a very great and thoughtful presentation to make. And as Elisa suggested, we'll take any questions during the session, and then Elisa and I will pose them to Steve at the end. So Steve, I'll let you take it from here.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me, Peter and Elisa. This has been a great opportunity for me. I think as great supporters of the Fashion Scholarship Fund, we are grateful for what you do on a day-to-day basis and really appreciate you having me on here. So thank you for the opportunity to share with your students, especially over Zoom at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday night. So I'm keeping people from dinner. And if you're watching this on a recording, welcome to you too. Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen quick. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to walk you through the agenda. I'm going to introduce myself as well as take you through Milk Makeup a little bit, discuss the role of finance, walk you through a cash flow statement, as well as a P&L statement, and then talk through some of the budget and forecasting terminology that we go through. And then we talk through a method to evaluate profitability, be it for customers or for products. It's a neat little tool that we use on a day-to-day basis here at Milk Makeup and other brands that I've worked at. And then we'll talk through some key takeaways and open it up for questions and answers. So just to introduce myself, I'm born and raised in Toronto, Canada. My parents are Vietnamese war refugees that ended up in Toronto, Canada. I basically grew up there for my first 20 years. And then after graduating college, I worked for a food and beverage company, Kraft Foods, got my summer internship and my first full-time job through them. There, I got super excited about working on consumer packaged goods products. I never thought that I would go into CPG. I always thought I was going down the finance route, i.e. investment banking, and that's why I got my chartered financial analyst. And once I got my summer internship at Kraft Foods, I just really was engaged in the products. And actually, one of the most exciting things I worked on there as a summer intern was how Canadian is this? But basically, Wayne Gretzky did a limited edition cereal box on some of our Kraft Foods cereal boxes, and it became kind of the big hit of summer of, I think, 1999. It was, I think it was the first cool hot drop of the year, way before Supreme was big. We dropped the Wayne Gretzky cereal boxes and they became sold out in a matter of minutes when they hit store shelves. And funny enough, I actually Googled online this morning to see how they're doing. And on eBay, they're actually selling for around $37 a box. So, I mean, if I kept some of those boxes, I'd be a rich man right now. But after working for Kraft Foods as a summer intern, they offered me a full-time job and I jumped at it. You know, as I mentioned, I wanted to go into the banking route, but decided, hey, I really loved brands. I loved consumer packaged goods, and I wanted to work for a place that I could touch and feel the product I was actually working on. After about a couple of years, I joined PepsiCo as a finance manager working on Quaker Foods business, as well as with Tropicana in Canada. And then about 3 years later, PepsiCo actually transferred me to the US. There I worked on the food service division, which is the division that sells to restaurants and amusement parks and movie theaters and stadiums. And I got to sit side by side with the business development lead to really pitch deals and structure deals with all of these amazing accounts, one of them being Yankee Stadium right in New York City, and got to basically structure the deal there over a 10-year period, 10-year agreement with them, which was great. After doing food service finance for a while, I got to work on M&A, really integrating brands that PepsiCo acquired. One of the brands that I worked on was Naked Juice, as well as Izzy Beverages. They're sold in Whole Foods and sold in many convenience stores, and really got a chance to kind of sit down with a brand that was acquired in a small town in Boulder, Colorado, to really integrate it into the PepsiCo systems from an information technology standpoint, headcount, payroll, everything you can imagine, financial processes, really helped integrate those brands into the portfolio within PepsiCo. After that, within PepsiCo, I also joined the marketing strategy and finance team to really help lead from a finance standpoint the $9 billion carbonated soft drink portfolio division. All the brands that you know, Pepsi, Diet Pepsi, Mountain Dew, and really worked very hand in hand with the marketing lead to help drive growth in those brands as well as profitability, and really analyze our marketing mix to make sure we were investing in the right places for the brand. After about 10 years at PepsiCo and a couple of years at Kraft Foods, I told myself that I didn't want to be in the food and beverage industry anymore. And one of my good friends had actually reached out to me to join L'Oreal. Got to meet the CFO there, and they offered me a role to be the vice president of finance for Kiehl's. Kiehl's, the skincare brand, as everyone knows and loves, was started in New York City back in the 1800s. At the time when I joined in 2012, there were only 30 locations in the US. Basically, we grew the footprint of the Kiehl's stores from 30 stores in 2012 to about 100 stores in 2015. So saw tremendous growth from a top line standpoint, grew the business top line about 3 times, both on freestanding store direct to consumer business, as well as our online business. At that time too, we also started selling Kiehl's into department stores like Nordstrom and Neiman Marcus and Macy's as well, and really drove the growth on a wholesale perspective. And so Kiehl's was a really interesting brand for me to work on. It was the first brand that actually felt an affinity to the culture and through to their values. They're very philanthropic, as you may know. They really give back, raise a lot of money for AIDS research and awareness. They give back to a lot of children's charities, give back to the community that they have stores in, and also really help drive awareness for hunger as well. So it was a brand that I actually felt like at some point, you know, is the first brand that I actually could work on that actually gave back and could do good in the community, as well as create a lot of sales and profit. But typical L'Oreal fashion, they have you working on a brand for about 3 years and they transition you to a different one. So I started working at Lancôme and spent, Lancôme being $1 billion business in the US alone, from a retail sales perspective, really spent a lot of time navigating market share and profitability with that brand, because it had been around so long, and from a maturity standpoint had been around since the 1940s. It didn't have a lot of growth left in the US. So managing the P&L, managing costs, and making sure that it was as profitable as possible was really the goal within the finance realm for L'Oreal, for the Lancôme brand. So after spending about close to 17 years in consumer packaged goods, but also in Fortune 50 companies, I decided that I wanted to work for a startup organization, and I fell in love with a luxury sustainable fashion brand called Nguyen, which was founded in New York City. And I joined them in about 2015, 2016 timeframe, and became their CFO and COO. And it was my first foray into fashion, first foray into startup world. and first foray into managing a brand and a company that had to think about cash. To be honest with you, PepsiCo, L'Oreal, they were all brands and companies that had been around for over 100 years that had a ton of cash and generating tons of cash from their brands that were a lot more mature. Working in a startup, it was very daunting because of you had to worry about when your next paycheck was going to come in. Because as you guys know, being in fashion, you never know how successful your next season is going to be until you actually see the sales come through. And unfortunately, with a brand like Nguyen, I had a beautiful story around building sustainable fashion with artisans in third world countries and bringing that luxury fashion to consumers in North America and beyond. The supply chain costs of producing those goods were significant. And every piece of apparel actually averaged about $1,000 for retail sale. And you can imagine there's a very small percentage of people that could afford the clothes for Nguyen. And being a small brand, even in the department stores like Bergdorf and Barney's, they really bought your product on consignment, meaning at the end of the season, if the product didn't sell, they could return all of that back to you. And so you would only realize a lot of that, the cash of what you sold. And you may have spent a lot of that cash upfront a year ahead of time to build that season, whether it's for the runway show, building production, sourcing all the materials, getting the artisans to put your designs together, bringing it back to New York to finish it, and then selling it to the market. It could be a year before you realize any return on your investment from that fashion line. So I quickly learned that fashion was a very tough industry to be a part of. And unfortunately, with the high price points, the growth with Nguyen was pretty stagnant and the costs were significant. And at the end of the day, we ran out of funding. And while the brand had been funded very well at the beginning of the life cycle of the brand, as investors saw that the brand was not growing, they didn't invest more into the brand. And that's a very tricky situation, of course, when you have very expensive costs and you have to front a lot of money for your seasons and you don't have a lot of return on the investment. Eventually the cash runs dry. And unfortunately, we had to wind down the company. And as the CFO and COO of the brand, I had to shut down our warehouses. I had to lay off the design team. I had to lay off the production team. It was quite disheartening and very unfortunate at the time, but it was something that was necessary to move forward and move on. And hopefully all those people found great jobs beyond that. But it was a tough time for me personally, because I had never gone through something like that, but a great learning experience. And I think that's one thing that, you take away out of this. It's like no experience is a bad experience. It's just an experience that you learn from and that you grow from. And so coming out of Nguyen, I decided to go back into beauty, something that I knew a lot more and something that to me was a little bit more stable, where your production and your inventory that you sell is makes up about 80% of your turnover, and new product launches make up about 20% of your business. So regular products make up about 80% of your business in beauty, and 20 to 30% of your sales are usually from launch products. So it was a little bit more stable for me personally to go back into beauty. That's something I knew. And Cover FX was an independent brand that was searching for a CFO and COO at the time to really help take it through an acquisition phase. And so I joined Cover FX and spent about a year and a half really taking through the brand through an acquisition. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, the acquisition fell through for numerous reasons. And at that time, I had already decided that I was going to join Milk Makeup. They had approached me a few years back. I'd always been fans of Milk Studios, the fashion photography studio in New York, where Milk Makeup was born. And I really admired kind of the brand growing up through my L'Oreal world and watching it grow at Sephora. And when Milk Makeup reached out to me to become their CFO, I jumped at the opportunity because I knew it was a brand that also aligned with a lot of my values, but also had a great growth trajectory overall. So sorry, that might have gone on for a little while, but I thought it might be interesting to walk you through sort of my career journey. A little bit about Milk Makeup. So Milk Makeup is, as I mentioned, a brand that was born out of Milk Studios in 2016 in New York City. And really, it's quite simple. It was a brand that was basically built and created with clean, effective beauty tools for our ambitious and diverse global community. We create custom formulations and delivery systems that shadow norms. And the bottom sentence here, our products are inherently gender neutral, clean, vegan, cruelty-free, and easy to use. That's really the forefront of why I joined Milk Makeup and why so many of the employees also have joined the company as well. It's just, really stands for something. I think it, at the time in 2016, when it launched at Sephora, really broke open a lot of barriers. A lot of the makeup brands all looked kind of the same, a lot of beige, a lot of foundation, and then Milk Makeup came in with basically white backgrounds, white gondolas or display pictures at Sephora, and products that were very utilitarian. They were multi-use, they were clean, and had this great aesthetic to it, really in the name of Milk Studios. And it really shook up the industry, to say the least. And today, it's one of the fastest growing beauty brands. We are usually in the top 10 at Sephora as far as color brands are concerned, and one of the fastest growing makeup brands in the world. Our perspective is that our community is as savvy and aware as we are. They expect the best and don't want to sacrifice quality for style and ease. Our goal is to challenge current beauty norms and champion authentic self-expression with inclusive, clean, cruelty-free, vegan, and sustainable values. We are never prescriptive when it comes to self-expression. You are the artist of your identity. We provide the tools. As a progressive downtown New York City brand, we feel responsible to show the world what the future of beauty inclusivity looks like. That's kind of what we live. And if you've ever been to Milk Makeup, when we were down in the meatpacking district, you could just feel the energy as you walk in there. There's just always something going on with the studios. Now we've moved offices down to Soho in New York, and we have our own studios there where we shoot all of our content, all of our campaigns. We feature a lot of our employees in those campaigns. We feature a lot of people who are just big fans of our product in those campaigns and social media posts as well. And we have a really great community overall of over 2 million followers on Instagram. So switching gears to, I guess, the heart of the subject today, what is the role of finance? I'm going to talk to you about the day-to-day function of finance, as well as talk about cross-functional teams that we interact with. No hint here that basically we touch every part of the organization. Finance touches every part of the organization. It's really a strategic partner with everyone. And just talking about the specifics about the role of finance, I just jotted down kind of 8 points that we touch here. But basically finance and myself as a business partner with our CEO, we really lay down the foundation for the brand and the financial vision. So we really build out a 3-year plan, and we construct the annual budget and forecast, and I'll kind of walk you through what that means. Basically, we build up an annual plan. What are our sales goals? What are our expense goals? And what is our profit goal? And we really try to build that plan where it's executable and also ensure that we can hit those plans. And inevitably, when it doesn't translate to the results you plan, you need to pivot and reforecast. And so that's why you build an annual budget at the beginning of the year, but you end up changing it throughout the year as things change in your business. I tell everyone I miss 100% of my past forecasts. It's true. You never get your forecast exactly right. But what you don't only measure your success by how accurate your forecasts are, you also measure it by how quickly you can pivot when you are missing your forecasts and course correct. I mean, for example, during COVID, we must have had 30 different forecasts in the month of March and April, building best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, most likely case scenarios. And at the end, what was great that we never had the worst case scenario happen, but we did, obviously had to change our annual budget to reflect what was going on in the marketplace with all the Sephora's closed, abruptly in the middle of March all the way through June. Basically, we saw our revenues go down to zero. Luckily, a lot of our business picked up on milkmakeup.com as well as on Sephora.com. But, with these things, you never know. And so the best thing you need to do is when things change on your business is you need to reforecast and plan out what the rest of the year will look like, no matter how difficult that may be and how many times you may have to reforecast. Number 2, strategic priorities. We act as a business partner with the organization to review the effectiveness of our business decisions. And that means that we work with sales to understand which markets do we go into, what product category should we launch in, and at what price? How much should we spend on paid marketing? And what is the return on investment on that marketing dollar? And should we own our own warehouse or use a third-party facility as part of our operations? All of those decisions, finance is involved very closely with all of the leads of the departments to make sure that we're making the right decision financially. We manage the P&L and financials, so the profit and loss statement and financials. I'm going to walk you through some examples of that. But basically, we develop the sales targets, the marketing budgets. We work with operations to develop inventory purchase plans. We review those decisions regularly to ensure they are meeting our targets. Sales, we review every week by retailer and by product. Marketing budgets, we review every month to see if our actual spend is in line with what we budgeted. And inventory, we review that to make sure we have the right targeted weeks of supply for our inventory. Audits, we ensure the accuracy and consistency of published financial data in line with internal and external legal requirements. So as a company that's private, we actually don't need to have audited financial statements, but it's important to our investors, to our board, that we have audited financial statements. Audited financial statements meaning that a independent outside accounting firm reviews all of your financials, audits them, and signs off that they are correct and reflect the true financials of your business. Because if you're a private company, you could make up a bunch of numbers if you wanted, send that out, people would believe it, and they're not signed off by anybody. So you want to have an independent audit done on your financials. It's very important to ensure the legitimacy of your financial statements. Control, we ensure the completeness of our internal controls to avoid business risks. So building processes and controls to minimize risks and protect our assets like cash and inventory. We need to ensure the accuracy of our records. We need to promote operational efficiency in the company and encourage adherence to policies and rules and regulations and laws. You think about it, a corporation is really its own entities with rules and laws governing its existence. And you kind of need to follow those rules to make sure that you're building a company sustainably and without risks to the financials. Raising and managing equity and debt is a really important function of finance. Obviously, you need cash to invest into the business, but also to build your business and to ensure that there's enough funding to operate and grow the company. At the end of the day, you need to, from a finance standpoint, ensure there's enough cash runway to pay the bills and invest in inventory and marketing and headcount and rent. And so we spend a lot of time building a cash flow forecast and model so that we ensure week by week we have enough cash in the bank to keep the company running. And that's very important, obviously, as a startup company that is spending money quicker than you're generating. You need to make sure that you're managing your cash flow. And we're going to walk you through kind of a cash flow statement as well. And then we have external financial relationships that we deal with the board, investors, accountants, banks, lenders, vendors, manufacturers, customers, all of that. We deal with them as well. And then we ultimately, too, the role of the CFO and the finance division is to break down barriers to ensure efficiency in the organization. If there are things that are holding up business from operating as efficiently as possible, if there's things that are slowing down sales, if there's things that are causing headaches for our marketing team or our operations team from an inventory system standpoint, it's the job of finance to really break down those barriers to make the company run. And so I always tell every employee in the company, if you have a great idea, we'll figure out a way to fund it, because great ideas means that we're either driving our top line or reducing our spend. And no bad idea, no good idea is going to go wasted, because we can always find the cash to be able to invest in those ideas if they're going to help drive a big return on your sales or reduce our costs somewhere. Okay, cash flow management. So cash flow management is really looking at your inflows and outflows of money from a business. It's necessary to maintain for your daily operations, taxes, purchasing, paying employees, and operating costs. And obviously, if you have positive cash flow, it means you're bringing in more money than you're spending. And it depends on really your life cycle of your brand and the company that you're in. For us at Milk Makeup, we're in the growth stage right now. So our revenues are growing quickly. Our net income is starting to grow as well. And most companies, your revenues start to grow, but you're losing money because you're spending a lot of money to grow the business, whether it's for inventory or marketing or headcount. You're spending a lot of money up front and you're not necessarily seeing a profit yet. And so as you grow your revenue and as you grow your net income, you're going to create more cash. However, you're going to need cash from the beginning. So as you can see from the chart on the right here, you can see cash flows from financing, which is the line at the very bottom here, financing. At the very beginning and introduction, you need cash, someone to invest in the company. So the financing comes from either debt or from equity, from investment from a private equity firm, or from family even, or your own savings. You need that cash at the beginning to start the company while you're ramping up your revenues and getting to profitability. Over time, as your business grows and you're in growth stage and maturity phase, you're generating a lot of cash from your operations. And that's the other line that starts to bubble up there in the maturity phase. And so then that's where the area is where you're really paying for all of your bills. Your revenue is actually higher than your expenses, and you're able to generate a lot of operating cash. And as I mentioned before, when I worked at PepsiCo and L'Oreal, cash was never a problem because all of their brands were in maturity phase or even decline phase, and they were generating a lot of profit and a lot of cash, and therefore it could reinvest that into the company. Whereas a brand like Milk, where we're in the growth stage, we still rely on a lot of money from financing, meaning private equity raises that we do, as well as a debt facility that we have to help pay the bills and pay for our working capital from month to month. And then if you're lucky enough to get to a mid-maturity kind of company, you have extra money where you can invest that money into other things, like think Tesla investing in Bitcoin, or other companies investing in purchasing other companies that generate income for them. So it's a place where all companies strive for, that they're growing, that they create a lot of profit, create a lot of cash, and can reinvest that into their own business or into other businesses that they want to go into. And at the end of the day, cash is king. That's what I learned the most from going from the L'Oreals of the world to a Mayette or a Cover FX or even a Milk Makeup. Cash is really king, and cash is really something that we watch meticulously on a week-to-week basis. And I'm just going to show a quick example of a cash flow statement. Obviously, all these numbers are fake; they're not real. But just to show you, kind of, if you look at the very bottom here on 1/1/2020. This company had $5 million in cash. In week one, they had accounts receivable of $5 million coming in. Accounts receivable are basically all the invoicing that you've done to your customers, and they're going to pay you within the next 30 days. And that's money coming in as cash to your bank account. So 5 million is positive cash coming in. But on the flip side, outflows from operations, there's $6 million in bills that this company has to pay for in week one. So $6 million comes out of the bank account. On top of that, they have $150,000 in corporate costs that they have to pay. That could be like rent or other overheads that they have to pay, probably rent, because it looks like they pay that like around once a month or so. And then they have some other small outflow of cash of about $5,000. So in this example, in week one, they are net negative cash of $1.2 million. And so that $5 million that they had on 1/1/2020 now gets reduced by $1.2 million in week one. And now they're at $3.8 million. And you can see so on and so on how each week fares. And if you look at the bottom there, it looks like week 5, which is February the 5th, 2020, they actually had negative cash of 2.2 million. And if you kind of look up, it looks like they had only $900,000 of revenue coming in from accounts receivable, but they had $5 million of expenses going out that week. That could be in the makeup world, it could be because we were building out display units for Sephora, or we're launching into a new market. And so we had a lot of marketing costs go out that week. Or inventory because we were bringing in a lot of new products for a product launch that was happening 3 weeks down the road. And so we had to pay the bills for that. So $5 million went out the door. So that week, our net cash flow from operations was negative 4.1 million. That drained our total cash to be negative 2.2 million. So what had to happen is that we had to take a term loan, that $3 million in week 6 that you see there, a term loan with the bank to pay down some of our bills and get our cash back into a positive position. Following week, in week 7, our cash also kind of drained a little bit, and we needed additional cash and infusion into the company. And so we raised $10 million in equity financing, whether through an investor or a family friend. I wish our family friend would invest in us for $10 million. They had extra $10 million laying around and invested into the company. And so the next week we could pay back our $3 million that we borrowed from the bank, and we still had about $4 million left in the bank after week 9. And so you can kind of see, if you don't plan out your cash flow by week in a granular level like this, you could get into a lot of trouble very quickly. And I think, going back to my example, the brand burned through a lot of cash, and it was very tricky to maintain and manage all of the cash flows that were going out on a business and not know what your revenues were coming in at. And that's the tricky part of this. Again, all of this is a forecast. And so you need to build various scenarios. If, for example, the $5 million of accounts receivable that we plan to come in that week 1 doesn't come in until week 3, what happens to your cash and what do you need to do? So there's a lot of scenario building that you need to look at when you're looking at your cash flow forecast. But it's obviously very important as your business is growing and as your business is net cash negative. Moving forward to the P&L statement. So the P&L statement is basically a profit and loss statement. Very simply, it's a moment in time where you look at usually a year or a month or a fiscal quarter. You look at your revenues minus your costs equals your profit, quite simply. And revenue obviously is what you sell to your customers, whether it's to the department stores or on your online business. How you price things, what products you're launching, and then your expenses are cost of goods, marketing, fixed overhead like salaries and travel, and you end up with your profit. I'm going to walk you through a P&L statement example here. So in this scenario, basically, if you focus on the middle column for 2019 actual sales, this company had $70 million in sales. Pretty good. We don't know what their 2018 sales are, so we can't say if this is growing or declining or flat. But you really look at your net sales, which is a true indication of your top line, which is your gross revenue less any returns and damages that you may have. And returns and damages happen specifically in makeup. Obviously, if people buy a product they don't like, they return it. If products get damaged when you're selling it to a Sephora and they need to basically get reimbursed for it, that hits this line. if there's product at the end of the day that gets damaged out at a Sephora store because they use it as a tester on the display unit, that hits this line. So your true selling revenue line is your net sales, because that reflects any kind of returns and damages, and also promotions to hit here as well. So that's your real top line number, $63 million. The cost of goods on this business here was $25 million for 2019. That's about 40% of the revenue. And then your gross profit here is $38 million, or 60.3% of net sales. So 38 million divided by the 63 million in net sales equals 60.3%. And gross profit is a very good indicator of how much profit each product that you sell makes. So on average, this company here, their products make about 60.3% in gross profit margin as a percentage of their net sales. So, assuming a product sells for $100, this product or this company would net about $60 from that sale of a $100 product. On top of that, you have your fixed costs. So distribution and shipping. Distribution and shipping is the costs that are related to your warehouse and getting the product from your manufacturing facilities into your distribution center. It's also the cost of shipping. In our case with Milk Makeup, we ship a lot of our product to our e-commerce customers on milkmakeup.com, and that hits in this number here. So in this scenario, the company spends about $3 million a year on distribution and shipping. Salaries and compensation is about $15 million, or 24% of sales. And then you have marketing expenses, obviously anything that we're paying for marketing and paid media, Google ads, Facebook ads, that all hits here, and that's $20 million, and that's about 32% of our sales. And then travel, 2019, there was a lot more travel, $1.5 million, which made up about 2% of our sales. You can see in 2020, there was a lot less travel because of COVID. There was only $500,000 spent on travel. And then all other SG&A, that could be your rent, any overhead, office supplies, anything else really just to run the office hits in this line as well. So that's about $4 million. So your net operating expenses are $43.5 million, and gets you to EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, of negative $5.5 million, or negative 8% of sales. So obviously this company here is not profitable. Below EBITDA, there's a couple other line items. Usually these are non-cash items. So depreciation, which is basically looking at your fixed assets and depreciating them over a certain period of time. So for example, with Milk Makeup, we have gondola or fixture displays in each of the Sephora locations. We pay for those upfront, and they may cost us, $10,000 each as an example. But what hits your P&L is the amortized amount, or the depreciated amount each year. And we depreciate those over 3 years. So the $10,000 that we pay for Sephora gondola, that gets expensed basically $3,333 per year. And that hits this line on the P&L. And then there's interest costs, obviously, if we have any kind of bank financing, and then other income and expenses that could be really anything that's really not part of your operating model, gets you to your net income. So you can see here in this scenario, the company is losing $10 million at the end of the day. And then fast forward to 2020, this company grew 43% on the top line to $100 million in gross revenue, $88 million in net sales. You can see that their gross profit margin increased from 60.3% to 63.6%. And that's important to know. Every year that your business is around, your goal is to increase your gross profit margin. And depending on what industry you are, fashion, makeup, it doesn't matter. You want to improve your gross profit margin, because the more you can gain out of gross profit, the more of that drops to the bottom line. And as you scale your business, you scale your top line, more of that profit drops to the bottom line and can pay for your fixed expenses. And you can see here, even though the fixed costs, our OPEX increased from 43.5 million to 49.5 million, it increased by 14%. As a percentage of net sales, it actually declined. It declined from 69% to 56.3%. So this business is actually scaling up from a top line standpoint, improving its gross margin and improving its operating expenses as a percentage of its net sales. So that's really important because I think, at the end of the day, just because you increase your expenses, it's not necessarily a bad thing. If you're increasing your top line and increasing your overall gross profit margin, you can afford to invest more into your business. And so this company is able to increase their marketing spend from $20 million to $22 million year over year, despite the fact that their expenses aren't increasing. Overall, their profit increased from EBITDA of negative 5.5 to positive $6.5 million. And so from a health of a business standpoint, you would say this business is doing well because they're growing their top line, they're growing their gross profit margin, they're growing their EBITDA overall, and they're scaling their business so that their fixed costs are not growing as fast as their top line. So that's a P&L. I'm just double checking time here. Just quickly on just the budget and forecasting elements. We spend a lot of time managing the budget. So building a P&L at the very beginning of the year, we build an original budget, just like I showed in the P&L there. We build the top line sales, the expenses. Every month, we review those actual sales and expenses and compare them to the monthly budget. If we see things that are moving in a different direction, we will reforecast. And so what happens after each quarter, we basically actualize the year-to-date sales and the expenses. For example, in Q1, March year-to-date, everything's actualized from January, February, March on the P&L from sales to profit. And then we'll reforecast April through December on a month-to-month basis what the sales and expenses should be. And we'll have a new reforecast that we measure against and try to make sure that we stay on course for that. If it's off or if there's changes again, we'll do another reforecast accordingly, and that becomes our new benchmark. At the end of the year, we close the full year financials and make sure that there's an independent audit that's done afterwards to make sure that we did everything correctly. Next, I want to share with you a little tool that we use at Milk Makeup, as well as other brands that I've been on at L'Oreal and PepsiCo. It's called the BCG Growth Matrix, and it was developed by the Boston Consulting Group back in the 1970s. And it's a planning tool that uses graphical representations of companies' products and services, or even customers, in an effort to keep the company, help the company decide what we should keep, sell, or invest more in. And you can see here, we look at growth of sales growth as well as profit. And we basically look at our portfolio of customers or products, and we see which one are the stars, the cash cows, and who are the dogs. And I'll explain that in a second here in an example. Okay. So looking at this chart here, basically this is a fictional company again. And as you can see here, where we plot on the x-axis, there's the net sales growth at the very bottom. And on the y-axis, it's the operating profit of these customers within this certain brand. And the perforated blue lines show the average profit of this company. So you can see here, it's about 11%. And the average sales growth, which is about 3% or 2.5%. And here we plot all of the customers based on their size. So the bubble size is the size of the customer in revenue. And you plot them based on their net sales growth and their operating profit. So here in the top right-hand quadrant, you can see the website and customer labeled HT1488. You can see that they are sitting in the top right-hand quadrant, meaning that they have higher than average sales growth and higher than average profit. So there's really only 3 customers, it looks like, that have this. So it's their own website. And the reason why their own website is has high sales growth and high profit is because on your website, you get 100% of the margin. When you sell a product for $100, you get $100 back from a customer. And when you sell a $100 product to a Sephora, they take about 50% of that upfront, and you get $50 back. So you can see why the website customer here is very profitable, because you're actually have very high margins, and it's also growing. So the website here, direct to consumer business, is growing. I don't know who this customer is on HT1488, but they're very profitable and they have very high sales growth. So that's something that we want to make sure that we keep that customer happy, because they're driving a lot of profit and growth for us. And you can kind of see in the top left-hand quadrant, all the customers that have high profit, but have lower sales growth or declining sales growth. And that's a problem, because in that left-hand side, those are our cash cows, what we call our cash cows. The right-hand quadrant, top right-hand quadrant, are called our stars. The top left-hand are called our cash cows, because they make up a lot of our profit, but not a lot of our sales growth. And in some cases here, negative sales growth. So we want to make sure that we are keeping these customers growing or getting them back to growth, because they drive a lot of the profitability of our business. The bottom right-hand quadrant, these are called our dogs. So if you can see here, they're below average operating profit, as well as below average growth or negative growth. And we need to either, and they're all pretty small, except for that big bubble right in the middle there. They're all pretty small. So I would say all these really small customers that really don't make up a lot of our growth, actually declining growth, and are declining profit or negative profit, we should probably get rid of them. They're customers that we don't need. They don't add anything to the portfolio. They are a drainer on our P&L, and we need to figure out a way to exit them, or get them up to be more profitable, or get them over to be to start growing again, and get them to profitability ultimately. Ultimately, you want to push all of your customers toward that right-hand quadrant if possible. And then the bottom right-hand quadrant, you have these two customers that are sitting there that have high sales growth, but very low profitability or below average profitability. These are called our question marks. The reason why they're question marks is because they don't really play a significant role in our portfolio. They're high in growth, but they're not adding much in profit. So why are they really there? So you need to really think about, what is the purpose of this customer? Maybe this customer is there to drive brand awareness. You know, we just before this call, we were talking about TJ Maxx. TJ Maxx is a great channel for Milk Makeup and other brands to move through a lot of excess inventory. So maybe they're not very profitable because we're selling excess inventory to them at a fraction of what we'd sell it to Sephora or through our own online business, but we can move through a lot of inventory that is just sitting around costing us a lot of money in our warehouse. And that business may be growing a lot for us, but it's not adding a lot of profitability, but it's driving brand awareness. It's getting your product into the hands of consumers that may not have access to your product before, and you're moving through excess inventory. So it may be, from a strategic point of view, a good channel for us to play in. So that's just an example of what we look at from a customer portfolio standpoint to really understand the role of each customer. Not only that, you can use this to plot your products. You know, we can plot, you know, for example, in Milk Makeup, we have Hydro Grip Primer and Kush Mascara, and plot all of our various categories that we play in, and see what products are growing, adding profitability to the business, ones that are draining that we need to discontinue, and figure out what we need to do with that portfolio of products and brands. So it's a great tool to use. Highly recommend it moving forward in any kind of business scenario. Okay. So last slide, and then we can turn it over for Q&A. Key takeaways from today's session. At the very least, find a brand that you believe in that speaks to your values. If there isn't any, create it. I mean, there's ample opportunity and white space out there. Finance is a key strategic business partner that works with every part of the organization and has visibility into the entire business. So make sure finance is your friend. I actually interviewed someone today for our e-commerce manager role, and she said the first person that I befriend in the new company is the finance person. And she's smart. I would say that she's pretty smart to do that. Cash is king. Plan for the worst and drive for the best. You know, you never know when you need a rainy day fund. And just like in real life, it's great to have somewhere, a back pocket of savings somewhere to help you run your business. P&L statements help companies benchmark current performance relative to future projections, and also help companies to compare performance to rivals in the same industry. 5, a virtuous cycle is one where revenues increase, costs decrease, and profits are reinvested in the company. Remember when I said it's okay that your costs increase, as long as your revenues are increasing faster and your profits are increasing, it's good to reinvest some of those dollars back into marketing or headcount or whatever you need to keep that company growing. And having a robust budgeting and forecasting process will ensure you can navigate your business through uncharted waters. COVID was a great example of that in 2020. And every product and every customer has a role to play in your business. Define that, strive for the stars and get rid of the dogs. And with that, I'm going to open it up for questions.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. As expected. Thank you very, very much. One question I have before we get into the Q&A session is just, Myet and other brands that are socially impactful, sometimes make business decisions for socially impactful reasons that may have some negative impact on bottom line. How do you as a CFO navigate that kind of attention?
I mean, that's a great question. I think ultimately a business is set up to be sustainable and to drive revenue and to drive profits. And if you can't do that, your sustainable mission basically goes down the drain with the company, unfortunately. And I think with Myet, that was the case with us. Had a great mission. Unfortunately, the sustainable business practices didn't lead to a sustainable business itself. And that ultimately was the downfall. And unfortunately, the brand couldn't help artisans in third world countries anymore develop their artisanship and bring that to the forefront. So you need to have a sustainable business model, figure out what works first to be able to give back and be sustainable. And I think an example with Milk Makeup is, we decided this year to donate 1% of our e-commerce sales to the Fashion Scholarship Fund, also 1% of our e-commerce sales to the center as well. And the reason why we did that was, one is that it grows as the business grows, and there's less risk in giving a percentage of your sales versus giving a fixed cost amount where you don't know if your sales this year are going to be the same as last year or the year after. And therefore, having some sort of measure of what you're going to give as a percentage of your business is something that you can manage, because as your business grows, you can give more, and as the business declines, you're giving less. So I think making sure that your whatever you're giving back or whatever your mission is aligned with kind of how the business is growing as well.
Thanks for that, Steve. And thank you very much for Milk's commitment to make that very generous donation.
No problem.
Question from an attendee. As an entrepreneur, what are the most important things for me to learn or think about as I launch my business? Slightly different context, but thought you could talk about.
Yeah. I would go back to if you have a product, if you have an idea, again, all good ideas can get funded. So really being able to speak to that idea or that product or showcase that product, if you already have that product, goes a long way in able to get investments in order to start that company. There's many different facets of gaining investment. Obviously, there's seed money through family and friends, and there's private equity firms out there. There's scholarship money that's available as well from folks like yourselves. So I think there's many ways to do that, but having your idea ironed out, really having strong conviction in it, and being able to present that out in a manner that gets people excited, because there's a lot of money out there to invest behind great ideas. So I think that just having that conviction and know-how goes a long way.
Got it. Another question, what percentage should be the largest expense on a P&L, and how is it best to control that expense?
Great question. I think ultimately your marketing dollars are what drives your overall business. The more you can invest in marketing, the more potential top line you're going to get. And top of the funnel, meaning brand awareness, down to conversion. The more marketing spend that you can afford to put behind your business, the better. Obviously, as it scales up, that marketing spend as a percentage of your revenue should decline. And what I tell people from a marketing perspective or from a P&L perspective, you want your marketing expenses to be about 20 to 30% of your overall net sales, depending on what stage of your business in. Obviously, in an early stage business, your percentage of marketing is going to be much higher. Sometimes it could be 50%, it could be 100% of your revenue. But as over time, you, from a sustainable business standpoint, the target would be around 20 to 30%.
Got it. That's a great segue to this next question. What do revenue trends indicate about the overall health of a company?
Well, obviously, revenue trends dictate how quickly your business is growing. A brand can grow in many different ways. You could grow with your existing distribution and just have more sales per location. So for Milk Makeup, we look at our comp sales week over week, month over week, year over year to see if that same store down in Soho is making as much money as it was a year ago, or making more, or making less. And we analyze the details on a door by door basis. Also, you need to look at your overall distribution growth. Are you opening up new markets? So for Milk Makeup, we just launched in Sephora, Australia, for example. So we look at the revenue trends there to make sure that it's growing as quickly as we want it to grow, as well as all the new markets that we opened up last year, like in the Middle East and in France as well.
Got it. This is a question from, and it may be not a possible one for you to answer, but does Milk have aspirations for brick and mortar locations, or is the business model focused on online and retailers like Sephora?
For Milk Makeup specifically?
Yeah, or maybe Steve, if it's easier, just talk about omni-channel and whether that should or shouldn't include brick and mortar, in terms of just.
Yeah, well, I think with a brand like Milk Makeup, we really relied on Sephora to grow the business from the very beginning. It was a partnership between our founders and Sephora. Funny enough, the story that Rossi likes to tell is like they went to Sephora and told them that they had this great brand with Milk Studios, and they wanted to create this makeup line. And they met with, the head of Sephora, Artemis Patrick, and basically said that we have this great community and they love the brand and we want to create this makeup brand. And Artemis was like, okay, let's see your product. And they didn't have any product to show them. They just had this great idea and this great brand. And lo and behold, Sephora was like, we really believe in you guys. We really believe in the idea. We believe in your community, and we want to create this product or these product lines together with you and launch in 50 locations. And so brick and mortar became a real growth driver for the brand, definitely at the very beginning when we opened up all of the stores in Sephora in North America, as well as in US, Canada, and Sephora and JCPenney. And then, we saw Sephora.com grow significantly, and we launched our own website. So every channel has its purpose. I think with milkmakeup.com, there's an opportunity for consumers to buy product directly from us. We can speak to the consumers from a brand standpoint. We can build a loyalty program, which we haven't done yet, and that's a big opportunity for us. But D2C business is becoming a lot more important in the overall mix with brands these days, as within fashion and beauty, especially during COVID, when all of the stores closed with brick and mortar in Sephora, we had to pivot very quickly and reinvest in our .com business to make sure that it was growing properly, that we had the right inventory levels. We saw our sales spike up, 200% in 1 month back in April of 2020, and we had to be prepared for that and pivot the business very quickly. And then we've learned that over this past year, we need to spend a lot more money driving people to our direct-to-consumer business as that becomes a better channel for us.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. One last question, because we're just out of time, is you walked us through your impressive career, Steve. What advice would you have for your young self, or for any of the viewers tonight?
Oh my God.
What you
I think,
yeah, way back when.
What would I change? I mean, for me, as I mentioned, all experiences are great experience. But the one thing looking back on my 20-year career, I probably would have taken more risks earlier in my career. I think that I stayed at kind of the Fortune 50 companies for a long time. I think that, for me, I got comfortable in working for big brands and big companies with processes and, a stable income and all of that. And I was afraid to take risks. I was afraid to go to a startup. What if I failed? What if I I get shunned by the big companies? How does this look on my resume if I am only there for 1 year? I think that mentality comes from a lot from my generation, but also how I was as a person, and how much risk I was willing to take. And in hindsight, I probably would have jumped and did something more aligned with my values and kind of my vision and culture more so earlier in my life versus waiting until 15 years down the road to do that.
That's a perfect ending to a great session. Steve, thank you for that advice. And thanks to Milk for its generous support of FSF. It was a great session. I know everybody who attended thought so, and the many folks who will now see the recording of it. So thanks to everybody. Please tune in on Thursday for our Accelerator Grant Shark Tank Pitch Night. Thanks again, Steve. And good night to everybody.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.